Continuing with our reading from Dallas Pimiento, Book 1, Bronco. I gotta go on a limb here and say I think I wrote this book about 12 to 15 years ago. Okay, we're starting with a piece called Frederick the Damager. Swinging her ponytail behind her like some unusually large fish lure, Minley Madison attracted nothing at all. She was running towards the small boat pulling away from the shore of the secret pond. Trying to reach it before catching it would be of a necessity involving her getting completely into the dark, cold water. Maybe, she had the luxury to think as she barreled forward in her out-of-shape way, I can only splash in up to my ankles. This thought remained with her even up to the point that she reached the water's edge, by which time the small boat and its evil monkey pilot were nearing the center of the pond, so that she splashed in anyway, going so far as to soak herself up to the buds of her prepubescent breasts. As the monkey turned back at the sound of her displacement, she lumbered into a hole below the water and managed to soak herself completely after all. Aha! 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 The monkey, not described as evil for nothing, laughed in his unusual way. You do laugh in an unusual way, his friend Mark later told him after the monkey had related the above incident. How is it unusual? The monkey demanded. Well, most people laugh like ha ha ha, but you go aha, 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 Mark explained. Maybe this is evidence of my great evil, the monkey laughed, this time joined by Mark in his more traditional manner. Together they continued to work on attaching the upturned boat to the bed of Mark's truck. Hopefully this will keep us warm during the trip north, Mark said idly as he turned the socket wrench. That's the plan, the monkey agreed. He held tightly onto the spar Mark was bolting to the truck's frame. Mark sniffed the air. Hey, he said, we better go check on that girl. You go check on her. I can't bear the sight of her. The monkey shuddered. Mark laughed. Maybe you're not so evil after all, he said. Oh, I don't know about that. I'm the one that skinned her, remember? He did not laugh, however. Nodding thoughtfully, Mark clambered out of the truck to turn the spit on which their meat was slowly cooking. Wholesale Food Cloth Trust. No sense returning by the way I'd come, I told myself. I already knew that route. So as I stuffed the last bite of the next to last piece of pound cake into my mouth and took the very last piece from the plate, I headed out the back door of the high-ceilinged kitchen into what had once been Lady Shipfed's herb garden. There was a sundial in the center of the garden, but I couldn't make any sense out of it. The watch on my wrist told me noon had just passed. Very important to keep up with the time. Days pass and one forgets what that means exactly. Watching every hour plays hell with the enjoyment of one's surroundings, but at least you get more done. I passed through the tall hedge that surrounded the garden into the parade grounds, where the locals are holding some kind of festival. Folk art types and crafters had set up booths in which they displayed and sold every conceivable kind of crap. Some of the booths on the large field sold snacks. Luckily, I didn't have to spend any money, having already stolen all I needed in the manor house. Nothing I saw among the booths or in the fat, sweaty crowd interested me. On the periphery were the couple of 1,000 cars that had brought everyone except me here that day. As I walked through the thinly graveled lot, I happened to spy an automobile so distinctive that there could be only one in all my universe. I knew whom it belonged to. No one was in it. I glanced around. I didn't see the fellow who owned the car. Tearing out a sheet of paper from one of the small notebooks I carry with me at all times, I wrote the following note and left it under one of his wiper blades. Bobadil. I was here today, but just missed you. One of these days we really must get together so that you can return the knife you stole from me. Sincerely, Lance Ash. I thought about letting the air out of his tires, but there were too many people about. It would have been wonderful to break into the fellow's car and steal some stuff from him, but I knew there would be an alarm. As I took the note in place, I glanced inside, hoping to see an envelope printed with his address or something that would give me a clue to his current situation. I hadn't seen him in 15 years. The baby seat in the back gave me pause. Hot strips of wood soaked in chemicals. The track led to a clearing among the trees wherein I found a small cottage. I say found, even though, as my grandmother used to sharply retort, it wasn't lost. Apparently the greatest generation was unaware of the alternate uses of the word. Shall I say, discovered it? That doesn't sound right, since obviously it wasn't unknown to the memory of man. There was smoke coming from the chimney and the sound of music. I just hoped there wasn't a dog around. The place appeared to have once been a typical peasant's dwelling, the home of simple people dedicated to little more than maintaining a tidy home. It had been taken over by what my grandmother mentioned above might have called hippies, could she have brought herself to say the word. There was a van out front, but other than that, there was little that I could see that gave me that impression. It was more a feeling I got looking at the old place. Maybe it was the fact that the music I heard coming out of the open windows was the cult album Love. Aha, a skateboard, I thought as I got closer to the house. That confirms my suspicions. The way I estimated things, my car was somewhere on the other side of the surrounding forest. If I could just make it by this house, we would be back on the road in less than half an hour. As I walked by a window, I heard a couple of the people inside, two guys talking about something. I imagined them both with beards, each younger than I in years, but somehow older in their outlook, independence, and emotional development. I wished that I could be living in that house, growing a beard, involved in some kind of art, uninterrupted by the demands of some wretched job. As I reached the safety of the tracks, which picked up again on the other side of the clearing, I reflected on what a waste I had made of my youth. Only a few minutes later I came to another clearing, this one much smaller. In the middle of it was a man about my age dressed in a suit and tie. I nodded at him. "Excuse me," he said to me, "but do you know where this path leads?" "To a small house not far from here, and beyond that to a parking lot behind a Dunkin' Donuts," I said. "That's what I needed to know. Thanks." He continued on his way towards the cottage. I imagined all kinds of scenarios resulting from this encounter as I walked the rest of the way through the woods. Dust-choked room beneath the work floor. The yard around the cottage was mostly white, sandy soil, sparsely dotted with weeds. The man in the suit, Ralph Flender, hoped there was no dog lurking about as I had. Unlike me, however, Flender made no effort to sneak by the house. He went straight to the back door and knocked. He wished the music wasn't loud. He would have liked to be able to hear if a dog was approaching. As he waited, he reflected on what a taxing journey it had been to get here. He looked at the ugly, barren yard that held more machine parts and old tires than plants and wished he could make an easier living. Of course, that's impossible, he thought. I never finished college. He had a friend with whom he had gone to high school with. This friend, some friend, Flender thought, we haven't seen each other in over 15 years, had a Ph.D. and was now some kind of executive with a hearing aid company. He was making millions just sitting on his ass. Meanwhile, Flender was walking through a goddamn forest to meet with his clients, two hippies 10 years younger than he. The door was opened by Troy. Travis stood just behind him. Liquor boxes full of comic books were stacked all about them. "Ralph!" Troy beckoned the man in the suit inside. "Why didn't you come to the front door?" "I got mixed up and came by the wrong way," Flender explained. "Hey, man," Travis greeted Flender. "Well, that's all right. You made it. Want anything to drink?" Troy led the way to the kitchen. "That would be great," Flender replied. "Whatever you have." Troy handed him a bottled beer out of the refrigerator. "Did you get the stuff?" Travis asked. Flender nodded in affirmation as he drank. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out an envelope. He passed this over to Travis, who opened it and removed a stack of photographs. Troy moved next to him and looked at the pictures with him. "Where did you get them?" Travis asked. "More importantly, where's the sheep now?" Troy added. "There's something you need to know first," Flender began. "It's not a sheep at all. It's a bronco." He speaks with fretless bass sounds. In the interest of maintaining sanity, I admit that one day death will claim me, and there will be nothing for me after that final experience. However, in the light of that grim terminus, I suppose it seems equally insane that I would waste so much of my precious time in the emotional hell that is the post office. I hate it. But in order to properly provide for my biological offspring, the poor man's art, I have to keep coming back into this place where I am considered to be a second or even third-class participant. The privileges and rights that belong to the shirkers, the imbeciles, and the historically disadvantaged are not for me. I returned to work full of happy dreams of fantastic, mythical mid-60s television, all color and celebrity, when celebrity meant more than mere flash-in-the-pan notoriety and a cheap willingness to show one's ass to the world's shrinking collective sense of propriety. A tiny jeweled box into which one might thrust one's weeping in ecstasy eye. The pink lights and smell of diesel quickly dispelled these dreams. I'll never find what I'm searching for because it doesn't exist. On my lunch break, I sit down to write. All I need is one sentence. Sometimes it comes easily, when I realize that the world is absurd and that I shouldn't give a shit about anything. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, and I have to force it, resulting in opening sentences like the following one. The two hippies were disconcerted to learn from Flender that a stranger had just passed through their yard, and that Flender had not told them immediately about this stranger. What did he look like? Troy asked Flinder. About my age, my height. He was wearing a suit, but not a very good one. He looked rumpled. Sorry I didn't tell you. I was too intent on delivering the photos. No, it's all right, Troy told him. I wonder who he is. Travis returned from a quick scout around the property. There's nobody out there, he said. Do you think somebody is out to disrupt your plans? Flinder asked. Could be, Troy replied. He stared at the ceiling, thinking hard. Maybe it was just some random guy, Troy, Travis suggested. I've told you before, Travis, there are no such things as random events, and certainly not random people. An appearance on the Noontime Radio Funhouse. Turning the rock over, Stalemont found the key just as the big fellow had said. Stalemont dropped the rock back in place and stood up with a satisfying bean soup fart. Charming, Imelda scared him by commenting. Where the hell did you come from? Stalemont demanded after his initial squeal of surprise. From behind the big man's back, she smiled, delighted at having gotten such a reaction from Stalemont. Stalemont looked up at Dallas Pimiento. Just how many arms have you got anyway? He asked. More than I did a week ago, Pimiento cryptically answered. He was smiling broadly, almost to the point of snickering. What did he have to be so mysteriously pleased about? If we examine him closer, sneaking up behind him with the omnipotent observer's single eye, we see that ghost-like Pimiento has a multitude of arms, each housed in its own sleeve connected to his black cardigan. Most bear puppets on their ends. I am Bronco, Pimiento greeted me on my return. So am I answered. That is to say, I have the Bronco. That's why I need to get straight to work. Who knows how long it will last? No, you don't understand, Pimiento shook his head. I am Bronco. I am Bronco. You're Bronco? I used my fingers in the air as quotation marks. What does that mean? I had forgotten, Pimiento said. Bronco is my alter ego, my secret name. Is your past that dead to you? I asked. I am dead, he said calmly. For once I didn't argue with him. It seemed to mean so much to him. If you say so, I sighed, but if you're Bronco, if that's your alternate identity, that puts me in an odd position. You see, Bronco is a state of mind I get into. Bronco is you. And you are Lance, Stalemont said to Pimiento, handing him the key. Now let's not get tacky, I said. I looked behind Pimento's back. Been into my puppets, have you? Selected readings from Drinker's Protest. Louise took down the heavy ceramic crock from the shelf over the framed portrait of John Wayne. Careful, Hans advised in his creaky voice. I've got it, Louise assured him as she carefully descended from the chair. Well, let's have a look, Hans said, watching the old but still girlish lady bring the crock over to the table at which he sat. He had no arms. He refused to let anyone feed him, however. He leaned his head over his plate and ate like a dog. Tonight he had been eating pound cake. The half-eaten hunk of cake lay before him. The crock soon sat beside Hans's plate. Louise put her arm into it up to her elbow. It's in here somewhere, she said. Gray water sloshed over the sides of the crock as she fished around. I hope she can find it, Dobson whispered to his accomplice. The latter man, looking in the window alongside Dobson, did not reply. He clutched his hands together tightly. He could not afford to allow himself to relax. He had been promised so much in connection with this evening. When at last he and Dobson saw Louise withdraw a key from the crock, he poked Dobson in the shoulder, and they moved together around the side of the little cottage. That's interesting, Hans admitted to Louise. Haven't seen an old-timey key like that in many a year. What's more interesting, said Louise as she sat down, it's what it goes to. Really? Hans didn't sound interested. He sounded drunk and sleepy, which he was. Dobson and his accomplice kicked open the door and entered, bandanas over their faces and stabbing weapons in their hands. Who are you? Hans asked with slightly more interest in his voice than before. Never mind, armless one, Dobson growled. Hand over the key, old woman. My name is Louise, the old girl corrected the intruder. She stood up with the key in her hand, putting it slowly behind her back. Hans got to his feet. I may be armless, but I can still fight. He raised one foot precariously off the floor. Dobson's companion threw a chair at Hans and knocked him down. Get the key, he hissed at Dobson. The latter advanced on Louise, his hands before him. Slippers grinding. Money for the club's annual convention was due to be apportioned at the meeting of the financial committee on Tuesday following Ned's birthday. As Ned tied his third favorite bow tie around his neck, he tried to put all anxious thoughts about either event out of his mind. After making final adjustments to the tie, he took a deep breath and said to himself in his head, in that voice we each have, the one that sounds like no other on earth, without accent, without discernible timbre. So what if I'm turning 40? So what if I'm not a member of the club? Regardless of his non-membership, Ned planned on being there when the convention started. His uncle Franz had promised him a job at the hot dog concession. This would give him access to the grand hall where the speeches would be made. He might have to wear a substandard bow tie and maybe a funny hat, but it would be worth it. He would know how it felt to be in the presence of those great men. His wife knocked on the door to the bathroom. "Ned, are you ready yet?" she bellowed. "Yes," he bellowed back. "Then why aren't you out here?" He charged out of the bathroom with fire in his eyes. "I'm almost 40, he growled at her. "You don't act it," she rebutted. "And I shouldn't have to take this kind of abuse." "You think you're being abused?" she demanded to know with her cutting rhetoric. "I'm the one that has to spend her summer vacation watching cable while you sell hot dogs. I already told you, you don't have to come." Ned hunted about for his keys. As he searched, he noted with satisfaction that his wife looked like an old feather pillow in her ill-fitting, ugly dress. "I just might not," she replied, but some of the heat was gone from her voice. Of course she would come. A crappy vacation was better than no vacation. Ned found his keys under a torn-open package of panty liners. "Are you ready to go?" he asked. "I've been ready." Together they drove to Ned's father's funeral.